Hello again, this is Scott Orr, and welcome to another episode of Other Record Labels. One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was to have an excuse to talk to some of the best in the industry, and my guest today, Portia Sabin, is definitely one of the best. Portia is the owner and president of Kill Rock Stars in Portland. Her label has been home to Elliott Smith, the Decembrists, Linda Perry, Horse Feathers, and Slater-Kinney. In addition to running a record label, she's on the board of A2IM, and she hosts her own podcast called The Future of What, which Pigeons and Planes just named one of the top 25 best music podcasts. Portia, thanks so much for doing this. How are you doing?
Good, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really do appreciate this. Ben gave me your contact, and the more I've researched you and your qualifications today, the more nervous I got for this interview.
It's okay. I'm a normal person. Don't worry.
All right. Can you take us back to the very beginning of the label? When did it start, and when did you come on board?
The label was started in 1991 by Slim Moon, who was a young state worker in Olympia, Washington, who loved music and was part of the music scene and wanted to document the scene as he saw it, and the bands that his friends were in. And he was a spoken word artist at the time, so his first release was a split 7-inch spoken word single with him on one side and Kathleen Hanna on the other side called Boy Girl.
Okay.
And then the first full-length release was a compilation that had a whole bunch of his friends' bands on it, including his next-door neighbor Kurt Cobain's band, Nirvana.
Oh, man.
And that record was released in September. It was August of 91 or September of 91, and then Nevermind was released in September of 91, and so the comp sold 25,000 copies.
Oh, wow.
Of the CD right away.
It was on CD. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I didn't know that.
So that's how Kill Rock Stars got off the ground in 91, 27 years ago. And I started getting involved around 2000. I started dating Slim Moon in 2000, and I was, at the time, I was in a rock band in New York. I'm from New York, and I was in graduate school. I was getting a PhD in anthropology from Columbia University, and we had this long-distance thing for a while, and then eventually I moved to Olympia to do my dissertation research at the Evergreen State College, and so I started doing some odd jobs around Kill Rock Stars. One time our press person went on vacation, went on tour with her band for a month, so I did press for a month, and then at one point he lost his production person, so I did production for a year and a half. So it's I started doing these sort of odd jobs, but it was still a very separate world.
Right.
I never had any pretensions to really work at the label. I was going to be a professor.
Wow.
And but in 2001, which is when I quit my band, I started managing bands, and I started my own management company called Shot Clock Management. And in 2005, I started managing one of the bands on Kill Rock Stars, a band called The Gossip from Arkansas.
Yeah.
They had moved to Olympia from Arkansas. They were 18-year-old kids. And I managed them for 3 years, during which time they went gold in the UK.
Wow.
They got signed to a major label. They signed a major publishing deal. A whole bunch of stuff happened during that 3-year period. That was pretty serious. I also graduated. I got my PhD, and I got a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Washington in Seattle.
Oh my goodness.
So I was commuting from Olympia to Seattle every day, and then, flying to London every third or fourth week. It was nuts. It was a really insane, nuts time. Oh, and I also married Slim, so we got married.
That's great.
And
when did you guys get married?
In 2004.
2004. Awesome.
Yeah, so we've been married a super long time. It's crazy. But So in 2006, one day Slim came home from work, and he was like, you know something? I've been doing this 15 years. I think I'm tired of it. I want to do something different. Would you take over the label and shut it down?
Shut it down?
Yeah, shut it down. So I was like, well, I have to think about that. And so I'm thinking about it as I'm commuting to, Seattle every day. And I'm like, man, I hate this commute. And I kind of hated my postdoc too. Like it really wasn't fun. And I
Okay.
was finding out firsthand that academia was not the, it's like after you go to grad school for a super long time and you think you want to do it. But I found out also that a lot of other people go into grad school with their eyes way more wide open than I had.
Okay.
Like I was just really interested in the subject. Like I love anthropology. I was totally interested in it. Love teaching. So, I thought this sounds cool. But like, when you get into it, you're like, oh man, this is maybe not a field that I really want to be a part of. It's pretty dog eat dog and hectic.
Right.
And, if you're going to be a professor, you need to really be willing to, the competition is so tough. I would have needed to be willing to move to, Tulsa or wherever.
Oh, I see.
And to get whatever job I could get. And I kind of wasn't into that. And then also at the same time, I'm, managing this band that's going gold. My management business is totally flourishing and I'm having a really good time. So I'm like, well, one of these has got to go.
That's so crazy. It's such a weird, I've heard so many weird trajectories into the music business. Like, it's so crazy. Like, I was talking with Corey from Three Lobed a couple days ago, and he's a full-time lawyer. And it's so bizarre how I just assume everyone starts off the same way, but that is so fascinating. So so Slim wanted you to shut down the label. He wanted you to take over and shut it down. What did that mean?
Well, that's the thing. It's like I kind of it also kind of didn't sound like a real long-term commitment to me. It sounded like, well, he wants me to take the label over and shut it down. I'm like, I guess I can agree to that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then at the same time, because I'm like, well, then I'll just be doing music business full time. And I'm not like a huge long-term planning person.
Okay.
So I wasn't like really worried about it. I was like, I'm sure that'll be fine. That sounds okay. But at the same exact moment, he was like, and I'm applying for this job in New York City at None Such Records, which he got. So at the same moment that I took over the label, we moved to New York.
Oh.
So it was total chaos. Like I was on the East Coast, the whole rest of the office is on the West Coast. I'm trying to do a job I don't know how to do from 3,000 miles away. I'm flying to London all the time. It was nuts.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. But here's the thing. He had already slated 27 records for 2007.
Oh.
So we had to put out 27 records. And so, my first and most important piece of business was, how do I figure out how to run this label? How do I figure out all the pieces of things that I'm supposed to be doing? And we have to put out all these albums that, had already been delivered and we had art and, there's stuff in the works. Like we just had a whole schedule of releases. So I just dove in and, poked my head up at around like November of 2007 and was like, hey, this is kind of awesome.
That's
I'm
amazing.
having fun.
And you're running
great.
it from New York, but where was the label was originally based in Olympia,
Washington.
Okay.
Yeah, Olympia, Washington. And then in 2007, the same year, we two of the people who worked at Kill Rock Stars moved to Portland and opened a Portland office. So we were kind of like we had three cities. We were in 3 cities, which was crazy. And then my husband got laid off after 8 months at None Such, and he came home on Friday and he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, get the hell out of New York City. Like, this is terrible. Because it's just New York. I mean, I grew up in New York. New York is my home.
Right.
And we were living like 10 blocks from my mom. But still, it was like, it just was too much. It's so hard to live there. I don't know. Kudos to people who can do it, but it's just the stress level is out of control. So I was like, let's get out of here. So we thought about where we wanted to move to, and we ended up picking Portland because, Maggie and Ben had already moved here, and we already had a Kill Rock Stars office open here. So I was like, well, let's just go to Portland. It seems like a perfectly nice place. We've always liked it in the past.
Right.
I mean, there was like not a ton of thought, I have to tell you. That was it.
But it seems
so
like
moved here.
It seems like Portland is kind of a like a great art scene, and there's a lot of labels from Portland.
Oh yeah,
was that the case in 2007?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there was always a funny pipeline between Portland and Olympia. most of our biggest artists on the label had actually come from Portland, and that was not by design. It just happened. So, 2/3 of Slater-Kinney are from Portland. Elliott Smith was from Portland. The Decembrists are from Portland.
Right.
Sort of, it just kind of fell out that way, which was weird. And, people would move to Olympia to go to Evergreen or whatever and then move back to Portland. I mean, that's what happened with Slater-Kinney.
Okay.
And so Portland just seemed really, and Portland is a good stop on tours. Like there's always going to be bands coming through. So we thought it would be a perfectly good place to live. But I'm not like, we didn't like really think like, weigh every single detail. We were just like, yeah, Portland sounds cool. We like it there.
And were you
music scene? Like,
were you still managing Gossip, or what was happening with that?
Yeah, I managed them until halfway through 2008.
Okay.
Yeah. But so we moved to Portland, opened, actually ended up moving the office to a different location. But yeah, moved into the Portland office of Kill Rock Stars and been running it ever since. We did not shut it down, as you can tell.
Yeah. What? Did you just say, like, I'm going to keep this going? Are you still in the process of shutting it down? Is that the thing?
Yeah, 11 years later, I'm going to shut this sucker down any day now.
Takes a long time.
It does. I think really what happened was over the course of 2006 and 2007, I found some bands that I really liked, and I signed those bands. And we put out their records in 2008, and that was Horse Feathers, Tau, and the Thermals.
Oh, okay.
And those three
Horse
records
Feathers.
did great. Yeah.
Great band.
All those bands did great.
Totally.
And so I was like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. This is awesome. So, and of course, then I, immediately signed bands that completely tanked. But that's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
What was
It was like,
sorry.
sorry.
So 2000. So when you started 2006, 2007, and you've brought us up to about 2008 now, what was the industry like back then, and what were your first few years like? I'm trying to think back to what, there were still CDs, whatnot. I think it was just prior to the vinyl, or vinyl is just kind of starting off to kick back in. What was the industry like then?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question to me for because I do what I do.
Right.
We had stopped doing, Kill Rock Stars had stopped doing vinyl for several years at the point when I took over.
Okay.
Slim did not put out vinyl for
Interesting.
anything. And it took maybe a couple years. I remember we had moved to Portland, I think maybe 2008, 2009, when we started doing vinyl again. When people were like, we really need vinyl.
Yeah.
Really, it's gonna sell.
Yeah.
So it took us maybe a couple of years before we started doing that. But now, of course, obviously we do vinyl for everything,
Sure.
pretty much everything. But the other thing that was interesting, and I always give my husband a lot of credit. He's genuinely an industry visionary. Like, he really is. He's the kind of guy who's like, Tom Silverman of Tommy Boy, or I can think of other people who just had a vision and a belief about how the industry was going to go, for good and for ill. People with an ear, Tom Wally, for if you want to go on the major label side, but now he runs an indie called Loma Vista. People who just had an ear for music, for bands, and also just a nose for the industry. And I think that one of the reasons my husband wanted to get out of the label was because he smelled the digital revolution
Really?
coming. I do. I honestly do. He doesn't even necessarily say that, but I think that's the case, because he's always had that like 5-10 year vision,
Right.
which I've already admitted that I do not have.
Right. Because when he made that decision in 2006, iTunes was it was present, but it was
it was a baby. Yeah, it was a baby. Because really, what I would say the big event of my tenure at Kill Rock Stars has been the digital revolution. It was a really tough time to live through. Everything changed. We went from when I took over the label, we had a product that we could we could physically make, and that we could physically sell, and we had an entire business model put together based on physical sales to, through a distributor to independent and other types of stores.
Are you saying primarily CDs?
Primarily CDs at
Okay.
the time, yes,
Yep.
absolutely. But also whatever else was,
Okay.
our other little bits and pieces, because, sometimes there were 7 inches. There's kind of more of a market for 7 inches in those days than it's not. It hasn't been as consistent.
Right. I've
these
heard
days.
that. Yeah.
But it was, to literally, so that was, I could make a business plan and a marketing budget based on sales. And when I first took over the label, I could be guaranteed that whatever I put out would probably sell about 2,000 copies.
Wow.
And if it did well, if people were into it, it would sell more than that. But 2,000 was kind of like the basics. And that would allow me to make a plan on how much I was going to spend on recording, how much we were going to spend on marketing, how much we were going to let them spend on art and photos.
Right.
It completely dictated how we would approach each release. And overnight, we changed to a place where you that was it. Music was free.
Really?
And overnight. And you couldn't make that apples to apples comparison anymore. You couldn't make a business plan. You couldn't make a marketing plan. You just couldn't plan the same way. And that's where we're at now. We're in a very new moment.
Yeah. When you say overnight, what year was this we were talking about?
Well, I think the worst year, the really bad year was 2010.
2010. Okay. And so, but that was prior to streaming in the way we know it now, right? Wasn't it? Like,
absolutely.
So it was MP3s that did that shift?
It was, it was the ability of people to go online and listen to something for free and not have to buy it in a record store.
Right.
And it just completely crashed record sales.
Right.
And now, obviously, nothing has gone away completely. Vinyl is nice and healthy, and even the CD. I was in a board meeting the other day and saw a slide of different formats over the last, I think, 15 years was the slide. I can't remember.
Yeah.
10 or 15 years. And CDs have only declined 30%.
Wow.
In a time when digital downloads have declined 60%.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
right.
All this talk that you see in the news these days about the death of the CD, I kind of would myself have a little, give people a little pause, because I think 30% in 10 years compared to 60% in 10 years is actually, I think we're all agreeing that there's the death of the digital download.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think it's true about CDs. And there's certainly artists that we still need to make CDs for, because they're mostly a
right.
CD.
That's true. Yeah,
band.
I've heard that too. And I think it's really kind of centric to where to different cultures. Like I'm sure there's other countries where CDs play a bigger role. And I think there's other genres where and demographics where CDs are still present. So I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think everybody is sort of continually surprised when they think about it because of the changes in technology in terms of like Apple just quit making, MacBooks with a CD drive.
Right.
So
That's
it's
true.
like people send me CDs and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah,
I don't have
know.
any way of listening to this,
Yeah.
But cars have CD players still.
Yeah.
I mean, and lots of people drive cars with CD players. So that's one big way that people listen to music. And then, still a lot of people have stereos with CD players. I mean, so it totally depends on the demographic.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get right down to it, older people who are the people who are more likely to buy CDs are the ones who are more likely to buy music in the first place.
Right.
So, you can't count those people out.
That's really good. No, that's really interesting. Man, okay, so we're talking about 2010 was a rough patch. Was there? I mean, I'm hoping there's a light at the end of the story. But was there a time where things started to shift and you started to see a little bit of hope, or is it constantly changing where everything is unpredictable with each release?
Well, I will say, 2010 was bad, and I think 2011 was the year that Spotify came to America.
Okay.
I think. You can fact check me on that. I'm not
Sure.
totally sure.
Sure.
And I was extremely, we were all spouting the same narrative at that time, which was, streaming music is devaluing music, and I'm not going to accept a rate of 0.0043 cents per stream for a song that, could cost 99 cents if you're buying it as a download.
Yeah.
And so I kept my whole catalog off of Spotify for the first year.
Okay.
And then I had a band, Horse Feathers, in fact. My friend Justin, who is the singer in Horse Feathers, he came to my office. They had just gone on a big national tour. And he was like, Portia, we got to be on Spotify. And I was like, really? Why? He's like, every single night, kids would come up to the merch table and say, why are you guys not on Spotify? Like, I can't find you on Spotify. And I was like, oh, man. Like, damn it.
Interesting.
So annoyed. But I was like, well, listen, we'll give it a try and we'll see what happens. So we put our stuff up on Spotify, the whole catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And we even did the, we did the windowing thing where, it's like we'd keep a release off for the first month and until it had a chance to play out in retail. And, the numbers from Spotify are just absolutely insane. They've just been growing and growing and growing and growing. And so Spotify and other streaming services have created a very significant new income stream, which at the moment is pretty stable. So that's been great. We're all very happy for that. I would say I remain a skeptic about everything because you just never know. And I would, I think one of the nice things about being an independent label is that independent labels are small enough and our overhead is manageable enough that we can be nimble and we can change up if necessary. I remember, I think it was 2010, I think we only put out one record the whole year because I basically told my staff, I was like, well, you have a choice. You can get a paycheck or we can put out records.
Wow.
But this is it. Like we are going to be lean and mean and we're just going to, survive. Put our heads down and see if we can stay in business. And then we did, thank God. And, as we've come out of that time, it's gotten better and better. But that was rough. And, I interview people all the time on my podcast. And lately I've been interviewing a lot of people who started labels in 2010.
Wow.
And I'm always just like, oh my God, how did you do that? That's so incredible to me because I'm like, that is the time that I'd be like, toilet paper salesman, window washer.
Right.
Like, what else can I do?
We're hopping all over the place, and I want to camp out on streaming just for a sec because it is such a popular thing, and it's so mysterious right now. But I've noticed too, Spotify going from, it came to Canada just a little bit later than America, but I noticed in the past since 2016 where the revenue for certain artists started to be kind of stable, almost as if like it was almost like this. There's a subscription service to your music, and it's a little bit more predictable as opposed to when we'd have a release on Bandcamp, we'd make a couple $100 in that week or a couple of around a few of those weeks, and then that album would kind of die and disappear. Whereas I've noticed Spotify to kind of does away with the release date a little bit and gives a longer life to records. Anyway, I want to ask you, did you pivot your promotional efforts to focus on Spotify lately? Is that like when that kind of did that shift, like how does that change the way you guys do things?
Well, that's a good question. I had a lot of trouble. I still, I think it might be different for younger people, but because I ran the label in the era of physical, I have a lot of trouble believing in paying to push people to a service where they don't really have to pay.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
So we actually did no marketing with Spotify of any sort. And recently, just this last year, we actually did start doing some marketing, but it's because the services have been stepping up and offering, some help
Right.
in various types of marketing.
Okay.
So it's more like I'm willing to do it if they're willing to contribute too, because that, I think, and all the services are a little bit different from each other, but, it's always been difficult for me to find a way to like give Amazon a break,
Right.
It's like Amazon doesn't need a break from me,
Yeah, it's true.
They don't need my $1.50, right?
Yeah.
Like they are doing fine.
Yeah.
And, we do work, I think Apple's been a really great partner especially for indie labels.
Yeah, for sure.
We've liked working with them a lot. And yeah, lately I would say we are doing a little bit more marketing towards some of the streaming services. But as a rule, I would say our marketing efforts are aimed at, day of release, go
Right.
to our merch table, pre-order, go to your local record store.
Right.
We try to support indie retail as much as possible. And, we do that by giving special gifts and giveaways and goodies that you can only get at the record store.
Totally.
And I think a lot of labels do that right now.
We're talking about streaming, and I read an article recently, just the other day, that I think is from a year or so ago, called "The Secret Lives of Playlists," and I don't know if you read this piece, but I found it very overwhelming, and kind of for a tiny independent label, it was really discouraging. What advice can you provide for like startup indies or smaller indies, like for navigating the streaming world? Because it seems like it's shifting back to like the radio in the 80s, where it's really difficult to get any sort of or retail, I would say maybe in the 90s or 2000s, where it's getting different to have our artists discovered on Spotify.
Well, I think maybe you need to not think of Spotify as a discovery platform.
Okay.
I think that might be one way to help, because I do think that there has been a lot of talk about, the word discovery has been used, and it's also been used by Spotify. Like Spotify in particular has really used that, like Discover Weekly. Like they are really touting themselves and their algorithm in particular as doing great stuff for helping people discover music. But, there's an argument that radio was also helping people discover music, and no one had any idea of the, millions in payola that it took to get a band on the radio. But that doesn't mean that that's not the first place I heard Duran Duran, because it was, So it's like I still did discover music. I just discovered music that was probably getting pushed by, big corporations for a lot of money.
Right.
And that's not always bad. Like that's not, I would say one thing that's kind of different right now is, a lot of the fallout in the music industry in the last 10 years, especially, because right around 2010 when everything was hitting bottom, a lot of the majors laid off a lot of people.
Right.
And those people went out and started independent record labels.
Right. Interesting.
They did.
Interesting.
And that's legit. And they brought their expertise and their connections and their knowledge and everything. And, there are some very big, very powerful independent labels in America right now who are genuinely independent. And I think that's only a good thing.
Incredible.
For the system. But, it's like, Taylor Swift is on an independent label.
Right. Yeah.
And so, is it a bad thing that people are learning about Taylor Swift from Spotify algorithms? I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to argue that.
Right.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. If you're a small label, if you're, you have a young unknown artist, it's tough. There are some services that have popped up that, I'm not plugging because I am, like getting a kickback or anything.
Sure.
But, I recently interviewed the guy who runs a service called Crosshair, which is basically it's a discovery platform. It helps you get your, you pay a certain amount of money and they send your song to certain, playlist curators. And if the people like you and put you on their playlist, it's like another way to get yourself onto those. It's like, it's not payola, but it's like the tiny minor version of
Yeah.
hey, will you listen to my song? Like, how do you get people to listen to your song?
Yeah.
And, these days I find that a lot less objectionable than I did 20 years ago, just because we're talking about an ocean. The world of streaming music is an ocean. It's just a vast, the internet is just a vast ocean of music. You cannot be expected to be able to know what's in it and to have heard everything, and I feel like that's, it's the technology has presented us with new challenges, and it's good for us to take advantage of the tools that technology presents us with to try to get people to hear new stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well,
and I think there's regular channels, press and all that stuff that you could still do, but take advantage of what's out there.
I like that you said not to rely on streaming sites as a platform for discovery. What do you think are platforms of discovery that some artists are overlooking because of all the hype around Spotify?
Well, Bandcamp, I'm a huge fan of.
Absolutely.
I think Bandcamp is great. I think they have put together a great staff of curators. They've done more and more curation to help people be able to find stuff that they wouldn't normally find. And I don't think you're going to get, I think it was just this morning that I saw in the news that 99% of Spotify listens are for 10% of the songs that are on Spotify.
Yes, I've heard that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, but that's really not surprising, right?
Sure.
That is the nature of popularity.
Yeah,
that's what
true.
popularity means, right? So the nice part about Bandcamp is, they're not an algorithm that's just aggregating listens, because necessarily if you're listening to something that's aggregated by an algorithm, the thing that you're going to listen to first is going to be the most popular thing that most people have listened to.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yes.
So it's just, that's how it is. But at Bandcamp and at other places, other sites that are curated,
Yes.
hand curated and not machine curated, you're going to find new stuff that you would never imagine. So, check out Bandcamp's
Totally.
playlists and little articles and stuff.
That's actually a good point. That's a great argument against the algorithms when you realize that can end up just becoming your own musical echo chamber where you're being fed music that you're already going to like, as opposed to discovering something that maybe makes you a little uncomfortable at first. I think that's kind of interesting. I hadn't really looked at it that way. I love Bandcamp. They just came out with their year end. And talk about CDs. I think they said their CD sales are up last year. But I think it's so fascinating. It's funny, they've been referring to streaming sites as renting music. That's kind of the verb they use, which I think is cheeky, but it's a good point. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go back to the label. You've said something that I really want you to explain. Super serving the super fan. Can you explain that?
Well, I think that is kind of the business that we are in right now. If we're not in the business of selling, I'll try to be clear about it. Once upon a time, you put your music out into the world, you as a label, you would, release a record and you'd be like, I hope 1 million people hear this record because this record is really good, right?
Right.
But the way that we've evolved and where we're at right now, you're pretty sure that 1 million people are not going to listen to it. And there's so many reasons for that. One is just time and the amount of other things that are out there.
Right.
You're competing. You're not competing against 1,000 other songs. You're competing against 1 billion other songs. So it's not possible, right? It's just not possible for your thing, even if it becomes NPR Song of the Day, or even if it's 10.10 on Pitchfork or whatever. It's no matter what the thing is that's pushing it, you're still not going to get every single person in the universe to listen to it, right?
Yeah.
So what can we do? Well, we can find the people who love the artist and we can give them more and more and more, because those are the people a proven track record of being interested in this artist and loving this artist and wanting to support this artist, which is, an urge that fans do have.
Yeah.
And so you have to give them opportunities to do that. I mean, I learned that from Benji Rogers of Pledge Music like 7 years ago or 8 years ago when he was like, you have got to give people the opportunity to pay more, because if you don't, you're leaving money on the table. And I could not agree with that more. Like, you have to listen, if your CD is $10, you have to give, that's great. A bunch of people will buy it at $10 because they want the CD. But if you have a CD plus the band will cook you dinner for $1,000, you'd be stupid not to do it because guess what? There's 5 or 6 people out there who would totally do that.
Yeah.
Who would totally pay $1,000 to get the band to make them dinner or whatever. And you'd be leaving that $5,000 on the table if you don't put that out there as an option. So
that's a good point.
I think that is kind of the business that we're all in right now. And you see that all the time across the industry with deluxe packaging and, bonus CDs, bonus LPs, bonus 7-inches, bonus everything, and all the gifts and the different types of merch. And, that's what we're doing is we're kind of at the moment, we're kind of in the business of super serving the super fans.
I love that. That's a great line. In that regard, Kill Rock Stars would have, would you say they would have their own fan base, that there are fans that would, essentially buy whatever you put out?
Well, that's the funny part. In the 90s, you remember indie cred? Remember the phrase indie cred?
Yeah.
I don't know how old you are, but that was like a real thing for a minute. People actually cared. And selling out. That's another phrase that kind of went hand in hand with that. And so there was a lot of, the indie cred was something that you could trade with. You could actually have indie cred. You could give other people cred. You could, you could sort of taint people or bless them with your credibility.
Right.
And labels had distinct personalities and distinct audiences. In the early 90s when Kill Rock Stars was around, I was a huge Kill Rock Stars fan. Before I knew anybody who worked there or knew anything
That's awesome.
about labels.
That's amazing.
I was in a Riot Girl band, and we covered Bikini Kill songs and Bratmobile songs and all that stuff. And to me that was really important. So when you saw the name Kill Rock Stars, you were like, oh, I know I'm going to like it because they have all these awesome, Riot Girl bands. And I bet band is going to be something for me.
Yeah.
And it was the same with other labels, Alternative Tentacles, SST, Touch and Go. You kind of knew what you were going to get and you trusted. It's like you trusted the brand.
Right. Totally.
And then the world changed, things became different, and I would say that labels still definitely have their own brands, their own personalities, but I don't think fans have as much loyalty anymore. I don't think people are necessarily, or there are not as many people who feel quite as strongly. I could be wrong. I mean, there might be a ton of millennials who are listening to this going, no, I care. I really love Don Giovanni,
Right.
Father-daughter records or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
great.
these are great labels, I think.
I agree. And I the reason I ask is I'm kind of curious is that, I spend a lot of time working on the label website and working on the aesthetic of the label and interacting with, running our social media. But I'm conflicted because I wonder, and I want to ask you, how much effort should be put into promoting the brand of the label versus the brand of the artists?
Well, I think the brand of the label really just has to come down to your values. And so I don't necessarily know that you have to promote that in any way except via the bands you sign.
Okay.
Like for me, we've always been really feminist, really, queer positive and really punk. And so I feel like as long as we're putting out music that aligns with those values, then we're doing, the artists speak for us, right? They tell people what our values are and what kind of a label we are. And I don't necessarily think we have to do a ton more branding than that. It depends on how you want to position yourself in the industry. I'm not 100% sure that it's like, does anyone who's a Taylor Swift fan, for example, know that she's on Big Machine Records, which is an independent label?
Right.
Do they know that? Do they care? Hard to say.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I almost think that labels are branded more for other labels and other people in the industry, so people kind of know who you are.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Fair.
Like within the industry, as
Yeah.
opposed to like fan facing. I think fan facing, your branding should all be about the artist.
That's really wise. It's a good point. Yeah, now I feel guilty for because I'm kind of thinking, yeah, maybe it was just to kind of impress other industry people.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
So let's shift over to comedy. This is something that was really interesting when I was looking through your label, and something that Ben really wanted me to talk to you about. So your label has recently, I don't know how recently, but done something really unique and gotten into comedy records. What was the impetus for that?
Well, one thing was we were really interested in comedy in the office. Like everybody in my office loves comedy.
Okay.
And has for years and has purchased comedy records and stuff like that. But we didn't know how to get into comedy because the only models that we had were like, Sub Pop had some like David Cross records and Patton Oswalt records. And so I was like, well, how do you do that? You just like call a famous person and be like, hey, famous person, you want to do your next record on us? Like, It just seemed really weird. Like to me, that was just, I didn't know how would I do that? Like call up, some those famous New Zealand dudes, I can't remember who they were, whatever, and just be like, hey, do you guys want to do a record? I don't know. Sure. It just seemed weird. So that seemed like out of reach. And then in terms of like young up and coming comedians, I was very interested in it, but I just hadn't like figured out how you would really do that, or if there was a market for it, like anything. So then one day in 2012, the comedian Kurt Brownohler tweeted something about Kill Rock Stars, or we retweeted a tweet of his. That's what it was. Okay. And then he tweeted, "Oh my God, Kill Rock Stars just retweeted me. My 14-year-old self is freaking out." And like within an hour, I had gotten a hold of him because we were huge fans of his in the office.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was on the phone with him and I was like, dude, do you want to do a comedy record? And he was like, I totally want to do a comedy record. So we did it. So 2013 was our first comedy release, which was Kurt Brownohler.
Okay.
And we just had so much fun doing it. And we found out like how so many things about comedians are different from working with artists. First of all, the overhead is the costs of recording are so much lower.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a whole band going into a studio. It's just one person.
Are they live recordings?
So that was like, yeah, they're all live recordings. And it was really fun because, living in Portland has a lot of advantages, one of which is that, we're friends with the venues and the venues are really rad. And so it's like they let us do like a free recording, basically. We had to pay for the sound engineer, but,
right.
They got to keep the door.
Yeah.
That was our first experience, and we've done it differently in other ways, but it was just like it worked out, and we're just like, oh, this is really fun. And then we've learned so much from we've done a whole bunch of different things, but what I quickly discovered after we released Kurt's record, and I love Kurt, he's totally a friend, and he knows that I would say something like this. We immediately were like, wait a second, do we just want to put out white guys? Like, no, this is an opportunity for us to be true to our brand and, put out those alternative voices that are out there right now, the women and the people of color, the queer artists. And that is totally in alignment with, who we've been all along.
That's so funny. That's the question I have right here is that, how did comedy align with your original vision or did you have to shift? But that's amazing to hear.
Yeah, that was like a big part of it. We got so excited because we were like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity for us to put out these fabulous artists of color and, queer people and, fabulous women and just, everybody that the types of artists we've always wanted to work with, that we've always worked with, but, these are comedians. And I think that, it also was like just the perfect time because, as you know, here in America, we're in somewhat of a horrible political situation.
Right.
And
I've heard.
I think it was, yeah. Oh my God, Justin Trudeau, like, can he come
Isn't
save
he great?
us, please?
Isn't he great?
Yeah. Can he put on his cape and like come get us?
He probably could.
I bet he could. But it's like, so we had all at the same exact moment, not only a lot of, alignment with who we wanted to be working with, but we also had a lot of alignment in terms of people who had a lot to say. And, there was a lot of sort of speaking truth to power and a lot of, personal truth happening. And we just got so excited because we were like, this is exactly, I mean, this is Bikini Kill, this is Bratmobile, this is Huggy Bear. These are like those Riot Girl bands that were so honest in the early 90s about their experiences and their political vision and beliefs. And so I just was thrilled that we had an opportunity to sort of dovetail with our, 20-something-year-old self.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So I want to ask about the audience for comedy records because I'm a little ignorant in all of this. I've never bought a comedy record, although now that as I was thinking about it last night, I do remember like friends having, CDs of totally blanking on some comedy and musical comedy records. But anyway, I do remember like a time where my friends would have like an Adam Sandler or a Dane Cook or something like that in high school. But what does the audience look like? Are you doing these on vinyl? Are they strictly digital, or what type of people are buying these, and how are they being consumed?
Well, we learned, we tried a lot of things, and I would say the bottom line is that comedy records are 100% digital download.
Okay. That makes sense.
And we don't run them on the streaming services at all because that would make us no money because people, the thing about a comedy record is you want to hear all the bits on the record.
Right.
But you probably only want to hear them once.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So streaming makes no sense. It's not going to make anyone any money. And downloads are awesome because people want the whole record. They don't want just one cut off the record.
Yeah. So
it's been great in terms of that. CDs we discovered, indie retail, rock mom and pop rock shops don't do great for selling CDs. I think people aren't going in there looking for comedy CDs.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the greatest. Artists like to sell CDs on the road though.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense.
So now the way we do it is we offer artists the opportunity to make CDs. Like we'll make a few hundred CDs for them.
That would make sense.
For if they're going on tour, and we'll just say how many do you want, and we'll make them, and that'll be that. Because the way for people listening who don't understand how labels usually manufacture stuff, you're usually talking about over 1,000. Like 1,000 CDs is like the smallest quantity you'd ever get normally because of the price break. You wouldn't want to spend more than that. But we learned quickly that if you get 1,000 comedy CDs, you're going to be sitting on 600 comedy CDs like real fast.
All of your family gets that for Christmas for the next 5 years.
Exactly, for the next 25 years. Yeah. So, and then we discovered sadly that vinyl doesn't sell at all.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too
tragically.
bad. Really?
Yeah.
I could have sworn there would be like a comedy section in record stores, but maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe it's used, like old stuff from the 60s or something.
Well, and I think maybe I'm too old at that point because I used to have, we had like Eddie Murphy Raw and Steve Martin.
Right.
I don't even know
Yeah.
what the names of those LPs were, but those are LPs. Like we listened to that on vinyl when I was a kid. And so I don't really know why that is not a hot market for comedy, but it's not. I'm here to tell you. It is not.
Right.
Do not make vinyl. Yeah.
That's too bad. I mean, that would be kind of cool. No, it's really interesting. And from a business standpoint, like when you're talking about digital distribution only, recording it at the show, and I'm just like the whole engineering of it would be way less complicated than a full length record or band record. Music, on the other side of things, music is so competitive as we've talked about. Was doing comedy records a way to do something that was less common for labels to do? From a business standpoint?
Yeah, it was less competitive, but it was also like we just got really into it. It was really fun.
Yeah.
And working with working with comedians was really refreshing because it's only one person instead of a whole band.
Right, right.
Working with a band can be challenging because multiple people have multiple ideas, and depending on the artist, it can be easier or less easy. But comedians from the get-go are extremely aware that they are their own brand and that everything they do is to market themselves. And so they really came to us fully formed. They walked in and they were like, yes, you're making this album with me and we're going to sell it together and it's going to be part of my marketing plan for myself.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that was just really exciting because it was like, oh, thank God, we don't have to like argue with you guys about dumb stuff. Like you totally get it.
Yeah.
Like, get what we're doing. The selling part of this is not a shock to you.
That's so true.
And comedians have their own drawbacks, which we also discovered because sometimes we would record a comedian, work with somebody who then immediately moves to LA and gets a job writing on a late night show or something, and never does stand up again.
Right.
Like that has happened on a couple occasions, and I don't begrudge people a paycheck
Sure.
at all. Like I'm thrilled, but it's rough for us because part of the way that you sell all music, music and comedy CDs is you have artists out in the marketplace being visible on tour, and that way people are like, oh yeah, I got to go check them out. I got to go buy that record.
Right. Well, I mean, it's so fascinating to me, this whole thing, and I guess from a business standpoint, I was curious. It got me thinking about this outside the box concept, and I was thinking about Sam Phillips before he started Sun Records. He was recording like weddings and funerals and selling copies of those. Is there something more to this idea of a label doing more non-music albums? Have you thought through that?
That's interesting. Non-music albums. No, I guess I haven't. I haven't thought through that, like thought about other things we could do. Because I also feel like we were in like a little bit of a dry spell in a desert at that point.
Right.
Right, 2012, 2013. And I feel like things have picked up in terms of the artists that we are working with and finding. So I think I'm feeling more excited about working with bands right now than I was like 5 years ago.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just having like that late, just like, I don't know, mid-teens kind of bummer time. It was just really hard to find artists that we wanted to work with. Not that they weren't out there. We just didn't, we were not coming together for whatever reason.
Okay.
So it just was like a bleak moment for me.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's really cool that it's led you down that path, and I think it's cool for comedians to have a record deal. I think must be great for them.
Well, I think it's been mostly good for them. It's part of their overall plan. They go along and they do a lot of different things too. So I think it's been fun for us to sort of get in on what they're doing. And then, we get to watch them grow and go on and do different things. I mean, Cameron Esposito and Rhea Butcher had a TV show called Take My Wife, which unfortunately the second season, the channel folded before the second season could be released. But the first season was like one of the best shows I ever saw. They just killed it. So it was really fun. It was like we've done both their records, and it's just nice to be involved.
Moving over to the podcast. So you run a podcast called The Future of What? And you've got over 100 episodes. How long have you been doing that?
Started in 2014.
Okay. What gave you the idea to do a podcast?
Well, I think I started it as a radio show.
Okay.
And it's still on the radio in several different markets, like 9 markets or something.
Wow.
Around the country, including here in Portland. It's on X-Ray FM.
Right.
But I think I just was really inspired to do it because I was so tired of, the music industry has such a bad rep
Yeah.
amongst people, and especially throughout this whole digital revolution. One of the reasons that people often gave for feeling fine about stealing music or taking music for free
Yeah.
was they're like, well, the labels never give the artist any money anyway.
Right.
That was an excuse I heard a lot and read in a lot of articles. People were just like, well, why should I bother paying for music? Because that's just going to go to the label, and the label just, goes and buys another yacht or something and
Right.
never passes
Right.
that money on to the artist.
How many yachts do you have?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. And you have no idea. And I just was like, that's really crazy that people think that. And so, that's one prong. The other prong is I work with artists every day. Artists as a whole do not understand the business that they're in. That is not a disparaging comment about artists.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's frightening to me that they can continue to be artists. It's like perfectly fine. And, that's not their fault. It's like it's totally okay in America, in this world, to be an artist and not have a clue about how the business part works. And I think that that's really, really, really damaging to the artist.
Right.
I mean, people have asked me before, like, are you afraid when your artists are, asking questions or when they want more knowledge? And I'm like, you have no idea how thrilled I am to work with an educated artist. I would so much rather have someone standing over my shoulder being like, now, how much money did we make from streaming last month? Or like, what is this figure for? I would so much rather have that than have people have no idea, because when you have lack of knowledge, and I think this is across the board, and I also think this speaks to the larger political situation in our country, like when you have no knowledge, anything can fill that void.
Oh,
like
wow.
any wild surmise or supposition or stereotype or fear or anxiety can fill that void.
Amazing.
And so, out of nowhere, someone will accuse me of doing something terrible. And I'm like, oh my God, why do you think that? And they're like, well, I don't know, but I just think that. And then, you have to sit down and be like, okay, let's look at the books, dudes. Like, let's look at what's actually happening here. Like, I've been accused of doing crazy stuff. And one of the things that Kill Rock Stars has always prided itself on, my husband did it before me and I've always done it, is we pay our artists 4 times a year. And if you get a royalty statement 4 times a year, which I make with my own hands. And if you don't understand anything on that statement, here is my email, here is my phone number. Like, walk in here, call me, get a hold of me, and tell me why you don't understand it, because that is so dangerous. Like, I'm so scared of artists not understanding things and then being angry.
Yeah,
because it's
amazing.
just complete. Like, what can I do? Like, I am as transparent as I possibly can be. Because it's their money. They should know where it went. They should know where it's coming from. They should know, why they got what they got. And I worry a lot because I feel like artists, they'll sign contracts with people that they don't understand.
Right.
And then they'll be really upset about it years later. It's just, lack of knowledge is not a good thing. Education is extremely important. So that's one of the other reasons that I started the podcast, because I'm like, anything I can do to help people understand. And just sitting behind my desk every day is clearly not working.
Yeah.
I want more people to understand than the people that I just happen to work with. Like, I want to be as useful as possible. And so to that end, I started a podcast about the music business where I talk to other people who work in the industry so that weekly, musicians can hear from people who work every day in the industry, who've totally got their best interests at heart and who want them to succeed and be career artists. Nobody wants you to be a one-hit wonder and like come and go. They want you to like make a living and not have to be a barista and all that other good stuff. Because all of our jobs depend on that too. It's like we want artists to succeed. And so we talk all the time. That's what I do is I talk to people about what they do in the industry, how they do it, and, give information that people need to know. And I really feel like it's a mission that's only grown in importance in the last 3.5 years, because it's critical. It's critical that artists every day more and more, with this whole Spotify thing, the whole streaming music, now artists are getting paid on income streams that they can't even see.
Yes.
And they can't, the fractions of a percent, you don't know why you're getting paid,
Totally.
what you're getting. It's like it used to be that you sold a CD for $10 and you got $7 of that, $7 of that $10. Like that was easy, right? That's easy math. You can figure that out. Nowadays, forget about it. It's like, how do you explain to an artist, well, you made, $16.50 from streaming, and I don't know why, and I don't know, like how much or what. It's just it's crazy. So I think it's more important now than ever that artists understand that they're business people too.
Yeah,
and that they either hire someone who understands business or they educate themselves.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, and you're right. And I feel like if you're working in it every day, you're waking up and the numbers, the reasons. It becomes easy to assume that the artists know all this information as well. But we're forgetting that they've got their head in a guitar and they're thinking about other things.
Totally.
I think that's great. I love what you said about putting a face to the other people, or sorry, I should say what you implied, putting a face to the other people in the industry who were hurt by piracy and who contribute to an artist's career behind the scenes. I mean, you've talked with engineers like Sylvia Massey and label owners like Jesse and there's Patreon and CD Baby, Bandcamp companies are all featured. I love that. I think that is a really cool thing of highlighting those other contributors.
Well, it's because we all do this together. Like it's an industry, but it's a pretty friendly industry. People are all, people know each other and we work together for years and years. Booking agents, press people, people who do this all the time. And these people are just as devoted to the artists as anyone else. And so, I feel like we should get that out there as much as possible that like, listen, I'm doing a job because I love music. I'm helping artists because I love their music. And I want them to succeed and keep making music. I mean, I just got an email today that I sent around to my staff and I just said like slitting my own wrists in 5 minutes because the email was about a new algorithm that's been created in Japan that will take your favorite songs from whatever era of music you like and create a new song that you will personally like.
Oh, man.
And it makes it has an AI that it will sing vocals over it in the style that you like.
Oh, my goodness.
And so it's basically like a new company that is just
terrifying.
making, like it can make songs for you that you're guaranteed to like because it's like taking all your information about like the stuff that you like and it'll just like spit out songs. And I'm like, okay, is that the world we want to live in? Like, do we really want to live in a world where no human people make music?
Right.
Because I don't think that's what we're going for.
But it's the kind of world that really inspires art. I think it's like, that's why vinyl has come back is because it has always been a counter to the digital and to technology. And so I feel like when stuff like that happens, it's like the human element of artists kind of have to raise the bar and stand up and fight back against that.
Yeah. And I hope, that's that article you mentioned. Is that, I can't remember who wrote that, Liz Pelly or Jen Pelly, one of the Pellys, I think wrote that article.
Cash was right. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that article is really scary because it basically implies that that's the direction that algorithmic music is taking us in,
right.
is just stuff that's tailored for what you want to hear. And like, do we just want to make music that people want to hear based on other music that people have listened to that they've liked? And I think, that's the part that everyone's missing is like part of the great thing about music is innovation, right? Like new stuff that when people do something like The Clash or, Nirvana, like nobody had ever heard that shit before.
Right.
Like it was so exciting. I mean, I remember the first time I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit and I just like stood there. First of all, I was on a dance floor in London, which I couldn't believe it because the dance clubs in London are different from in America where, they actually play like real music instead of just like house music.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, this song is blowing my mind. Like, I cannot even believe that this is happening.
Right.
And I'm like in a dance club.
Right.
Like, they're basically telling me, not only is this amazing, but you can dance to it.
Yeah.
Like, feel free. Yeah. So it's, innovation is half the half or more of the magic of music. And to think that we're going to move to a place where you don't have any innovation, you just have like the same stuff recycled because
Right.
like you like,
Right.
if you
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
such
That's
and
right.
such, you're going to love this thing that sounds just like it.
That's terrifying. I don't want to take any more of your time. I've loved chatting with you. This is so great. There's so much information here. I'm just getting distracted with thinking about these philosophies. I'm just curious. I'm really grateful for that you've done this. You do a lot for the indie label community. You're part of a label coalition that Ben was telling me about, and we talked a little bit about that with him. You're on the board of A2IM. You do your own podcast, which you talked about, and you've done a lot of other shows, and you're doing this podcast. What motivates you really to be so generous with your time and knowledge of the industry? Because it's not normal, I don't think.
Well, that's funny. I mean, I don't know if it's not normal. Like, to me, it seems kind of normal because of the people that I get to meet all the time. I mean, that was really, I got involved with A2IM about 10 years ago. That's the Indie Label Trade Association in the U.S. And when I started to meet other label owners, like, I feel like being a label owner can feel very much like you just live on an iceberg and you're just by yourself. And I really felt that way a lot. I only knew a couple other people who ran labels, and they were definitely men,
Right, yeah.
which there's nothing wrong with being a man. It's just that I was kind of like, well, here I am on this weird iceberg. But when I started going to A2IM meetings and meeting other people who ran labels, it just really started inspiring me by making me realize that, like, wait a second, what I do is not that unusual. A ton of other people do it. And everybody does it in a different way, and everybody's got a different take. And such interesting people decide to start indie labels, and such interesting people end up running indie labels and are in the high ranks at indie labels. I've just loved meeting the people and working with people, and now I've been lucky enough to go around the world and meet. I was at IndieCon Australia last year, which is the conference for the independent labels in Australia. And oh my God, those people are so awesome. Like, it was so fun. It's like
great.
You find your tribe, like these tribes are around the world.
Right.
And it's just, I love these people. And I think part of it is that I just lost any shyness. It's like, if I ever had any shyness or fear, I kind of got over it. And I think that's probably just age, right? You just get old to a certain age, and you're just like, fuck it. Like, I don't care anymore. Right. What are you going to do? You think I'm stupid? Fine. That's fine. I don't care. But I also realized, it's like being in this business for 20 years, you end up with a lot of information and experience that other people can totally benefit from. And so it's like, I'm not going to sit on that.
Right.
I want to share it. And I want to learn. The industry is constantly changing. I mean, I learn stuff every single day, and I love having a podcast where I get to talk to people who are doing new stuff because, man, I learn stuff all the time. And it's so great to finally, to just feel like I'm not on an iceberg. I'm part of a community, and that community is active and moving and growing and changing. I feel like I totally want to keep doing that forever. Like, I don't want to stop doing that, and it inspires me and it keeps me excited. It keeps me excited about the job that I do.
That's amazing.
So I think that's probably the biggest
and
the biggest thing I can say about that.
I think it's awesome, and I love it. And I shouldn't have said it's not normal. It's just not something you would expect in any business, really, for people to be so to be so generous with experiences and to share different challenges like that. But I think it's great, and I have seen it a lot, and I guess maybe it's just coming from, I always assumed, it's like what you were talking about, filling that void. You just think, man, these labels look like they've got everything so figured out. They must be these really evasive, intimidating people.
Exactly, and they're not.
I love it.
They're really great, nice, awesome people who have questions too. It's like they've got questions too. They're not, everybody doesn't have all the answers, except possibly Martin Mills, who definitely might have all the answers.
Right.
It's humanly possible that he does.
Yeah, that's possible.
But he's also very, it's like I've discovered he's very approachable. He's a really nice guy. I've been on the board with him for years.
Wow.
And that's, you kind of have to get over your like weird indie label, fandom, which, 7 people know, but like you're like, oh my God, Martin Mills. But, it's like, and I really do think age is part of it, because I have some friends who are younger who have been running indie labels just for like a few years, and they're maybe in their late 20s and early 30s. And I think it's harder for them to step up, because I think you're still pretty unsure of yourself at that age.
Right,
but I'm serious about like, there's an age after which you just do not give one flying F. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, what are you going to do?
Well, I love it because we've all benefited from it. So it's been great. What does 2018 look like for Kill Rock Stars? What are you excited about?
Well, I am excited about Horse Feathers. We have
they have a new record, right?
Yes. Yeah, coming May 4th, and it's unlike any of his previous records. Well, let me amend that. It's a lot like his previous records, except that instead of doing all of his dynamics with strings, which he's always done, he got like a Northern Soul rhythm section.
Oh.
It's unbelievable.
Interesting.
Unbelievable. It's so cool.
Oh, man. I can't wait. I remember seeing that
incredible.
announcement. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, so that's my big thing I'm excited about. And then we got a few other records coming out. We've got 2 comedy records so far.
Okay.
We got a great new band from Portland called Lithics, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, I mean, it's stuff is happening. There's still stuff in the world that you can get excited about, and that's always nice. It's like you feel like you're still alive in the morning. You're like, oh, I love this music. I love it that bands are still making awesome music.
Yeah,
that's so refreshing and makes me feel so much better.
Totally. And I think it all comes down to that feeling of clicking a track and just getting those goosebumps, like what you were talking about on the dance floor in London.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the feeling. Well, thanks so much, Portia. I really, really appreciate it. It's been so much fun to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to hear. I'm so glad you're doing a podcast series about labels.
Oh,
I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah, well, it's it really comes down to what we talked about, like what you were mentioning about the iceberg thing. It's just that feeling of I'm seeing all these labels that I admire, big and small, on Twitter and just thinking, how are they doing this? How are they? I need to talk to them.
Totally. Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's great.
Thanks, Portia. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening. Check out Kill Rock Stars at killrockstars.com. Portia's podcast, The Future of What, is available on iTunes. It's also available from killrockstars.com/thefutureofwhat. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already, and visit us at otherrecordlabels.com.